Good evening and welcome to the Athenaeum. My name is Jenny Niven. I'm the Programme Manager at the Melbourne Writers Festival, and we are absolutely delighted to have David Mitchell with us this evening. Thank you so much. Great, so we're going to talk this evening about 1,000 Autumns of Jacob de Zoet. The book came out last year in 2010, but this is the first time that Australian audiences have been able to hear the author discuss it, which is very exciting. So I'm sure lots of you in the audience have already read Jacob de Zoet, The 1,000 Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, but I would like to just set the scene for you a little bit and then invite David to read a passage which will give you the full flavour of how beautiful it really is. So the novel opens in 1799, which for those of you who know David's other work, you'll recognise as immediately quite a departure from some of the other terrain that we've traversed. But it opens in 1799 in the port of Dejima, which is close to Nagasaki in Japan. And it's a very special little place, an enclave, a portal where the outside world is a window, basically, on Japan, the only part of Japan that's open to anywhere else in the world. And all of the action takes place in this very strange, unusual little window. The cat flap, I've heard you describe it as, David, which I'm looking forward to asking you a little bit about. But you've chosen a passage this evening which hopefully our audiences tonight will connect with. You're going to read a little bit from the book that unusually takes place in Australia.
Yeah, yes indeed. Right. I like to stand when I read, so, well, first of all, hello and good evening. Thanks very much for being here. Oh, this is going to be fun. Yeah, I'm moving outside my comfort zone a little bit. I usually read rather a sweet love scene, but I've read it 30 or 40 times by now, and I'm sick of it. And even my witty ad-lib asides are starting to sound very, very rehearsed. So I'm going to take something of a risk, and as Jenny said, read a piece from the novel that touches on Australia, which I've never read before. So it will be a bit rough around the edges. Please be nice to me. This is about the Irishman balances his hat on his thigh, what we'd call at home a skeleton in the cupboard. On Walcheren, says Jacob, on Walcheren we'd say body in the vegetable patch. Monster turnips, then, on Walcheren. May I speak in English? Do so. If I need your help, I'll ask. The carpenter takes a deep breath. Well, my name is not Contumi. Jacob digests this. You'd not be the first pressed man to give a false name. My true name is Fiacre Monteveri, and in truth I wasn't pressed. How I left Ireland's a stranger story altogether. One icy St. Martin's Day, a block of stone slipped from its harness and crushed my da like a beetle. I did my best to fill his boots but this world's not a merciful place, and when the harvest failed and men came to Cork from all over Munster, our landlord trebled our rent. We pawned da's tools, but soon enough me, ma, 5 sisters and 1 little brother, Padraig, were living in a crumbling barn where Padraig caught a chill. Soon that's 1 less mouth to feed. Back in the city, I tried the docks, the breweries, I tried fecking everything, but no luck. So back I went to the pawnbroker and asked for da's tools back. Your man says, oh, they're sold, handsome, but it's winter and folks need coats. I pay shiny shillings for good coats. You understand me? Toomey pauses to gauge Jacob's reaction. Jacob knows not to hesitate. You had a family to feed. 1 lady's gown I stole from the theatre. Pawnbroker says, gentleman's coats, me handsome, and gives me a clip threepenny. Next time I stole a man's coat from a lawyer's office. A scarecrow would not be seen in that, says your man. You try harder. 3rd time I'm bagged like a partridge. After a fortnight in Cork jail, I appeared in the courthouse where one friendly face was the pawnbroker's. He told the English judge, yes, Your Honour, that's the urchin who kept offering me coats. So I says the pawnbroker's a feckin' liar who deals in stolen coats, and the judge told me how God forgives everyone who truly repents and handed down 7 years in New South Wales. 5 minutes from entry to gavel light. Now a convict hulk. The Queen was moored in Cork Harbour and it needed filling, and I helped. Neither Ma nor my sisters can bribe their way aboard to say farewell, so come April, the year 91 this is, the Queen joined the Third Fleet out. Jacob follows Tuma's gaze over the blue water to the Phoebus. That's a British frigate that was docked in Nagasaki Bay at the time. Hundreds of us there were in that dark and stifling hold. Cockroaches, puke and fleas and piss and rats gnawing the quick and the dead alike. Rats as big as feckin' badgers. In cold waters we shuddered, in the tropics pitch had dripped through the seams and burners, and every waking and sleeping minute, on one thought, it was water, water, mother of God, water. Our ration was half a pint a day, and it tastes like sailor's piss, which no doubt much of it was. 1 in 8 died on that passage, by my reckoning. New South Wales. 3 dreaded little words back home changed their meaning to deliverance. And one old Galway man told us about Virginia, with its wide beaches and green fields and Indian skulls who'd swap a screw for a nail. And we were all thinking, that wasn't supposed to be funny, but it is quite, isn't it? Just notice that. Yeah. And we're thinking, Botany Bay is Virginia, it's just a little further. The constable's guards passed beneath the sea room, down Seawall Lane. Sydney Cove, it wasn't Virginia. Sydney Cove was a few dozen patches of hack and peck ho-rows where the seedlings would wither if they sprouted at all. Sydney Cove was a dry and buzzing pit of stingflies and fire ants and 1,000 starving convicts in torn tents. The Marines had the rifles, so the Marines had the power, the food, the room meat, and the women. As a carpenter, I was put to work building the Marines' huts, furniture, and such like. 4 years went by. Yankee traders began to call, and if life never got soft, then convicts at least were no longer dying like flies. Half my sentence was up, and I began to dream of seeing Ireland again one day. Then, in '95, a new squadron of Marines arrived. My new major wanted a brand new barracks and house up in Parramatta, so he claimed me and 6 or 7 others. He had been garrisoned in Kinsale for a year, so he fancied himself an expert on the Irish race. The lassitude of the Gael, he'd boast, is best cured by Dr. Lash. And he was liberal with his medicine. You saw the welts on my back. Jacob nods. Even Heritzun was impressed. For meeting his eye, he'd lashes for insolence. For avoiding his eye, he'd lashes for shiftiness. For crying out, he'd lashes for play acting. For not crying out, he'd lashes for stubbornness. Your man was in paradise. Now, there were 6 of us Cork men who looked out for each other, and one was Brophy, the wheelwright. One day, the major goaded Brophy into hitting him back. So, Brophy was slapped in irons, and the major sentenced him to hang. The major told me, "High time Parramatta had its own gallows, Monteverdi, and you'll build it." Well, I refused. So Brophy was strung up from a tree, and I was sentenced to a week in the sty and 100 lashes. The sty was a cell, 4 by 4 by 4, so its inmate couldn't stand nor stretch, and you'll imagine the stink and flies and the maggots. On my last night, the major visited and told me he'd be wielding the lash himself, and promised I'd be in hell with Brophy by the 50th stroke. Jacob asks, there was no higher authority to appeal to. Tuma's answer is a bitter laugh. After midnight, I heard a noise, and I said, "Who's there?" And my reply was a cold spike slid beneath the gap under the door, and loaves in a square of sailcloth and a water bag. Footsteps ran off. Well, with the spike I made short work of prizing away a couple of planks. Off I ran. The moon was full and bright as the sun. The encampment has no walls, you understand, because the emptiness is the walls. Oh, convicts ran off all the time. Many crawled back, begging for water. Some were brought back by blacks who were paid in grog. The rest died, I doubt not, now. But the convicts are mostly unschooled, and when word spread that by walking north by northwest across the Red Desert you'd reach China, aye, China, hope made it true. So it was China I was bound that night. I'd not gone 600 yards, though, when I heard the rifle click. It was him, the major. He'd slipped me the spike in the bread, you see. "You're a runaway now," he said, "so I can shoot you dead, no questions asked, you stinking Irish vermin." He came as close as we are now, and his eyes were shining, and I thought, this is it. And he pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. We looked at each other, surprised-like. He lunged the bayonet at my eye socket, and I swerved, but not fast enough. The carpenter shows Jacob his torn earlobe. And then it all went slow and stupid, and we were pulling at the gun like two boys arguing over a toy. And he tripped, and the rifle swung around, and its butt whacked his skull, and the fecker didn't get up. Jacob notices Tuma's trembling hands. Self-defense isn't murder in either the eyes of God or of the law. I was a convict with a dead Marine at my feet. I scarpered north along the shore. 13 miles later, as day broke, I found a marshy creek to slake my thirst and slept till the afternoon, ate one loaf and carried on walking. And so it went for 5 more days. 70, 80 miles perhaps I covered like. But the sun burnt me black as toast, and that land sucked your vigour away, and some berries made me sick, and soon I was wishing the Major's rifle had gone off, because it was a lingering death I was in for. That evening the ocean changed colour as the sun went down, and I prayed to St. Jude of Thaddeus to end my suffering however he thought fit. You Calvinists, you may deny saints, but I know you'll agree that all prayers are heard. Jacob nods. And when I woke at dawn on that forsaken coast, uninhabited and hundreds of miles long, it was to the sound of a rowing shanty. Out in the bay was a scaly-looking whaler flying the stars and stripes. A boat was coming ashore for water. So I was there to meet the captain and bade him a pleasant morning. Says he, "Escaped convict, ain't you?" Says I, "That I am, sir." Says he, "Pray give me a solitary reason why I should kick the balls of the best customer in the Pacific Ocean, the British Governor of New South Wales, by shipping one of his runaways." Says I, "I'm a carpenter who will work aboard your ship for landsman's pay for 1 year." Says he, "We Americans hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that'll be 3 years, not 1, and your wages are life and liberty, not dollars." The carpenter's pipe has gone out. He rekindles the bowl and takes a deep draught. Now to why I'm telling you this. Earlier in the stateroom, Fisher mentioned a certain major who's there on the British frigate. Major Cutlip, not the luckiest of names in our language, as you know. Hey, the Dutch speakers gave yourself away there. It sticks in this runaway convict's memory for another reason. Toomey looks out at the Phoebus and waits. Jacob lowers his pipe. The Marine, your tormentor, Cutlip. You'd think these coincidences are not happen, not off the stage, not in life. Repercussions fill the air. Jacob hears them almost. Yet, time and time again, the world plays this same feckin' game. It's him, George Cutlip of the Marines, late of New South Wales, washes up at Bengal, a hunting chum of the governor's. Fisher lets slip his Christian name at lunch, so there's no doubt. Toomey utters a dry bark in lieu of a laugh. Your decision about the captain's proposal and all, it'll be hard enough as it is, but if you do a deal, Jacob, if you do a deal, Major Cutlip would see me and know me, and by God, he'd settle my outstanding balance, and unless I killed him first, I'd be feeding the fish or feeding the worms. The autumn sun is an incandescent marigold. Well, I would demand the guarantees, the protection of the British Crown. We Irish know about the protection of the British Crown. Thank you guys or something.
Wonderful, thank you, David. He should have known if he was in a David Mitchell novel that he shouldn't have been that surprised to find a character from a previous life.
Yeah.
So you're renowned, David, for being a wonderful stylist, for having all absolutely, for all the complex narratives, the structures and technical dexterity that we find in all of your novels. But fundamentally, one of the things that I personally love about your work is how eminently readable it is. It's great fiction, they're great stories. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about where this story came from?
It came from being hungry in Nagasaki in 1994 and not having any money, and having read in The Lonely Planet that you should go to Chinatown and and get an all-you-can-eat tabe hordai meal for 800 yen. So I tried to, but I couldn't read the street sign, so I got off at the wrong stop. And instead of finding Chinatown, I found some buildings, obviously being Nagasaki rebuilt, but buildings from an earlier historical period. Beautiful white warehouses. And I went to investigate and found Dejima, or the modern-day remains of Dejima, because in point of fact the coastline's moved out a few hundred metres because of what do we call them? Land reclamation projects. And this is 94. There were a few warehouses and a museum or two. And so I went round and just became fascinated by this odd place, this historical anomaly where white people went, and instead of slowly taking over the country, they were instead quarantined off in this little offshore island, probably no bigger than 4 times the ground area, maybe 6 times the area of this theatre. Really tiny, connected to the mainland by a small bridge, probably the width of this stage, over which no one could go. Just the translators. And the merchants to do business with the Dutch, and the prostitutes also to do business with the Dutch.
Right.
But it was also for the whole 240 odd years when Japan was closed to the outside world, rather like North Korea is now. While in a way the world's first great totalitarian state was being established there. This was the little crack in the window that meant the country wasn't quite closed off. Its isolation wasn't quite pristine. Then as now, there was quite a hunger in Europe for information about Japan. It was then as now a place that besotted the Western imagination. And vice versa. By the end of the 18th century, there were a growing number of scholars who were realising that these barbarians in the far corner of the world were slowly taking over that world, and they had technologies that Japan and not even the Chinese, who were the superpower which historically Japan looked up to, possessed. And they were learning more and more what was happening to non-white races that the Europeans encountered in extreme cases, as in Tasmania, they were even being wiped out. And so increasingly the government realised that Dejima was an asset and authorised the study of Dutch and quietly encouraged scholarship. So that warfare, or the arts of war, metallurgy, navigation, agronomics, the hard sciences, even economics, were already filtering into Japan by the end of by the end of the 18th century. And so arguably, Dejima was why Japan was able to have its industrial revolution in the space of about 30 years and go from, say, the 1850s, when essentially it was still a medieval country, to just 50 years later able to take on the Russian Navy twice and win, probably because of Dejima.
Really?
You can even extend it into the Pacific War.
So how long did it operate in the way it did?
The whole of the time of the Sakoku period, when Japan was closed off. So 16, there might be some Japan scholars in the audience who can correct me, but 1630s through to 1850s.
It's a long time.
Yeah. Very long time.
It's clearly such a wonderful setting for fiction then, if all this traffic's happening between these two worlds.
It is, and I thought, well, why has no one really done this before? Because there isn't much in Japanese either. So, it's mine. I thought, and then I started writing the book, and I realised it was what a terrible mistake I'd made.
How so? Why was it?
Every third or fourth person was a spy whose livelihood was dependent upon reporting infringements of the many rules that govern the lives of the Dutch and everyone who went. There were only about 10, 15 Dutch people there year round.
And they were all traders, the Dutch that were there?
They were the riff-raff of the fatherland. You know, you had about a 4 in 10 chance of succumbing to one of the many non-understood fatal diseases if you went out east. So if you had anything to lose, if you were upper working class upwards, it wasn't a risk worth taking in most cases. I mean, there were other reasons why people went, but generally 6 in 10, not great odds. They were, merchants, 3 or 4 who would have known how to read and write, but the others were the heavy guys to do the lifting.
Right. So why was it such a mistake then? Because it sounds like very rich.
It does, but because novels need coincidences and chance occurrences for things like liaisons, etc. And the rulers of Japan liked the show exactly as it was, thank you very much. That's why they stopped, on pain of death, any Japanese person plotting to leaving, and that's why also the Dutch were kept behind these walls, so that foreign influence was maintained to, well, the books, but not the ideas. I mean, it's not that simple, but that's how they viewed it. So, Dejima was conceived and designed and run as a sort of anti-coincidence engine, and that's not again. That's flying against sort of the jet stream of the novel.
Yes.
Another reason was they couldn't speak each other's language. I mean, there's no CD-ROMs, no dictionaries, no Anglo-Dutch dictionaries until the early 1800s. It was a father-to-son business, so and no even halfway decent teachers amongst the Dutch, really, because on the whole they were illiterate oiks, apart from 1 or 2 officers who were only there to make money and not to be a splendid language teacher for the people who were trying to fleece you. So over the generations it was a father-to-son business, officially, until the period in question. It was illegal for anyone else outside these handful of families in Nagasaki to learn Dutch. Officially, it was illegal for the Dutch to learn Japanese, although being great linguists then as now, they did, or a few of the non-oiks had a stab at it anyway. So they couldn't speak each other's language. And you know, I thought, how are they going to speak to each other? What have I done? So I kind of tried to make some elaborate subplots whereby one of the translators would get himself smuggled onto a ship and sail to Batavia for a year and learn Dutch fairly well, and then come back and no one would notice he'd gone, and just run. So it was
I think that's
plausibility cracked. But then I kind of realised, well, actually no, you can use that. You can make that. I'm interrupting you.
No, please.
No, I must let you get a word in edgewise. This is your event as well. I've been speaking for 15 minutes.
That's all right.
Earn your money, Niven. You were about to say.
I was
think that's
about
the
to
most
say
successful
what.
aspect of the.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It actually, though, that gulf and that lack of understanding and the interplay, it allows language in the book to play a position of enormous power.
Yeah. Idiot that I was, I didn't realise that until about 18 months into writing the book and had to start again. So often, isn't it true, so often kind of the answer isn't in some obscure corner far beyond the field of human vision. The answer's actually hiding there inside the problem. Note to self. Don't be such an idiot.
But didn't you find that was part of the writing process of the book? I think you tried a couple of different drafts over quite a long period of time to be able to come up with the final product that you're happy with.
Yeah. There's that nice Picasso quote. First I find some things and I go looking for what it is. And it seems to work for me with writing. I mean, I wish it wasn't that way. I wish I could find it straight off. But I have to write a piece of a dog's dinner of a first manuscript to see what the problems really are and then work out how to fix them and then sort of mould and integrate them into a second and a third manuscript, which hopefully will be halfway decent.
So what were some of the big challenges and the big things you decided to change?
Really well. It always gets smaller. I always have a master plan for a kind of Antonio Gaudi-sized kind of concept of a manuscript that would be, it's like that nice bit in that Wonder Boys where Michael Douglas is typing the next page of his manuscript and he gets down to the bottom and writes page 2038. You have to watch the length. So they shrink. It was going to be in the first person because that's my comfort zone. But then the problem: how are these people going to think? What language can I represent people from the late 18th century thinking in when they're thinking? As opposed to when they're speaking, because that would be the same language, wouldn't it? And then it's this uninterrupted slew of archaic language. It sounds like Blackadder, non-stop, for 2,038 pages. No. So, yeah, I mean, it's a problem with all historical fiction. It's easier if you go into if you do it in the third person, much easier, because at least then big chunks you can slip out of a dialogue and give the readers 18th century English reading circuitry a break.
Right. But historical fiction was a big leap for you compared to some of your previous novels.
It was, but the fact I wanted to write about Dejima dictated that it would have to be a historical novel, because Dejima no longer exists. And if I could fix that, I would, but not even I can bend history. It's not for the faint-hearted, the historical novel. The tough things to do. You've got to get the language right, or rather, you have to get it wrong in the right way. If you get it right, which I attempted to, I combed these late 18th century novelists, Richardson and Fielding and Smollett, who's enormous fun, by the way. I mean, if you read Smollett, I thought he was Tobias Smollett, sort of starchy, really funny,
a lot of mud,
really smutty, really ribald stuff. I really recommend it. Smollett's worth a good look. He really is. It's
you heard it here first.
Great fun. So I filled a couple of Moleskines full of that, and again, wrote 50 pages in that archaic, accurate language, and it was laughable, it was awful. It was Blackadder, locked in with Blackadder. No, locked in with 12 Blackadders all around a table, all going at once. It was impossible. Yet, if you jettison that and just write in the language you're reading now, then again, the bubble of fiction gets popped, because you think, hang on, no. This sounds like a 21st century sitcom. This sounds like Friends. Yeah. That's no good either. So you sort of have to concoct a language that I like to call bygoneese. It's sort of not totally accurate, but it's plausible.
Right.
Use the subjunctive instead of if. So instead of saying if you see her, say hello. It's were you to see her, say hello. You use shall more than will. Just these kind of things.
It was that easy, right?
And then you have to do 3 bygoneses, one for the Dutch, one for the English, one for the Japanese. Otherwise, everyone's speaking in exactly the same way, and then you're on to being John Malkovich. It just gets worse and worse. And then for the Japanese, you need male language and female language, because women use pronouns a whole lot less in Japanese, including I. Why did I even begin? What an idiot. Why can't I write about kind of the Battle of the Space Pandas or something where I can make it all up? I'm a fool.
What was the research process like, though? Because you talk about it in a very easy way, but the level of detail that you would need to have gathered and researched in order to give it that quality of authenticity, I think that's pretty massive.
Yeah, it was extensive. I heard Woody Allen once say that for every decade back in time you set your film, add on another 8 million to the budget, because kind of it's harder, more expensive to hire and to make and to sew and to build the right sets and costumes, etc. Same sort of thing works with research. For every 10 years you go back in time, add on another 2 months to the writing time. What distinguishes one historical time period, and indeed one culture, from another, is how all the human needs that human beings have and invent are met. Needs for clothing, for medicine, for social rituals, courtship, how you die, where you die, how you get buried, how you light rooms.
And presumably how much you take those things for granted, whether or not that's still a challenge or whether it's something you've already solved.
Yeah, how you heat yourself in winter, who chops the wood, is it wood or is it central heating, etc. And the further back in time you go, the more you have to learn about how all these needs are met. And you can sort of begin to assemble a scene. Okay, what can I put in here to break up the dialogue, the monologue? I know he's having a shave. So there's a scene where Jacob's shaving, and I started that. Hang on, how is he shaving in 1799? When was shaving foam invented? What did people use before shaving? Soap? When was soap invented? Could a middle-class clerk on his income be able to afford soap, or would he have just shaved with cold water? Would it have been cold water or salt water? That might make sense. Ouch! That would hurt. Razors, etc., etc.
Yeah. So were those things
that's half a morning gone on Wikipedia before you even get the first sentence down, really.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that, did you find that
throw in a
spurred you
couple of
on?
games of Angry Birds and you've had it. It's 5 o'clock and you've got to go and get the kids from
4
school.
years. But did you find that all of the research got in the way, or was it liberating, or how was it to actually write in the midst of all of that information?
It's actually highly addictive.
Really?
And again, if anyone's writing a historical novel, then my advice would be research the background, but the moment you catch yourself researching the background to the background, stop! Well, there's sort of the hard research and the soft research. The hard research were the terms of the world, what was going on in the world. The University of Leiden has translated the day registers, a bit like a captain's log, but a book that the chief residents of all of the Dutch East Indies companies were obliged to keep about, there's a strong wind last night,
Right.
knocked the roof off this warehouse, and this is how much the carpenter wanted, but this is how much I beat him down to, these kind of details. They, just a few years ago, all translated into English. Godsend. Thank you, University of Leiden. And then, so I did that before I started. And then the soft research, how the room was lit at night. I did, as I went along, and on a scene by scene, okay, this is what I need to find out for this scene. So the basis. You have to find out, and then you have to hide it. Because otherwise you get sentences like, well, my lord, would you like me to, because it's getting rather dark, would you like me to light the sperm whale oil lamp, which, of course, burns with a bright lamp, allowing your lordship to read your diary, but which is also very costly? Or would your lordship prefer me to light the pig lard candle, which is much less costly, but smokes too much to allow your lordship to read the diary? Which, of course, pops the bubble of fiction again.
Right. And, spoils a love scene a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So I've heard in previous interviews you've described Dejima as a cat flap. And I just love that. It's the idea of it being a portal between two worlds, I think, is really interesting, and it's one of the links that this book makes back to some of your other novels, I feel. But the idea that was this point of contact where information was flowing, whether it was classical music or dictionaries, that point of information and the point of difference between two cultures and the places that those two things are able to meet, that seems to me lovely territory for fiction. But I think that maybe is one of the ways that this novel is like a lot of your other work, I think.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a rambly question.
Yeah, it's more an invitation for me to ramble rather than a coherent question. Ramble I shall.
I suppose it's the transference of information that I think it's really interesting about that. And you've got these two cultures that are struggling very, very hard to understand each other, and there's all the structures in place almost so that they don't. But the good will out in a way, and there's love scenes that blossom and then intrigue that comes. You can't really keep the two cultures as separate as you might like.
No. Everyone was on the make. Dejima didn't really make the Dutch East Indies Company much money. They kept it on more as a trophy, because for historical reasons. They helped the Japanese crush what was seen as a Christian rebellion just around the peninsula. So they were the trusted trading partner, and the shogun at the time gave them a trading pass. That shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, was then deified. So whenever conservative elements rose up in Japan and said, "I'm not sure if we want these tall white dudes down in Nagasaki polluting the spiritual purity of the fatherland," the Dutch could say, "No, we got a trading pass from God. No, you can't kick us out." And that was the thing they would save whenever there was a threat of fire. It was a trading pass. So only the Dutch were there, and of course the Dutch were rather proud of that. It would be like one European country having exclusive trading rights with China now. Of course they would be fleeced just as much as that country would, but they kept it on as a trophy. It didn't make much money, but the people involved, they could make a lot of money themselves by basically saying, "1 for the company, 5 for me. 1 for the company, 5 for me." From the captain, even the Governor-General in Batavia, down to the lowliest cabin boy.
But that is sort of one of the central questions of the novel, though, isn't it? How Jacob manages to keep his head up in the nest of vipers.
How can he be an honest man, in a den of thieves, Yeah, he does. I wanted to write, and sometimes almost annoyingly so, I wanted to write an uncool protagonist. He's slightly anally honest, and part of his journey is to learn how to be a bit more pragmatic and a bit more real world. He's also a devout Christian, which again in the modern context is, in many countries, is slightly uncool. Although I'm sure this book will sell better than any of my others in Utah.
But that's one of the things that really keeps him going, isn't it? His faith, and it's one of the points of real exploration when he has time just with individual characters who are Japanese. He's always asking them about their spiritual beliefs and about death and about their faith.
Yeah, but in a sense, you don't have to be Christian to be interested in what faith and belief are. They're very interesting things in their own right, and they're applicable to our own lives as well, even if you aren't a believer in an established religion.
But Jacob is one, another way that this book is different from your previous ones, I think, is that we do spend the entire novel, maybe not so much Black Swan Green, but we spend the whole novel with Jacob. He's one central character, and we spend a lot more time exploring his inner life, I think, than perhaps we do with some of the other characters in the previous novels. Was that a conscious choice? Did it just feel the right time to write that sort of narrative?
He drops out of the middle quite a lot, doesn't he?
I guess so. When we're up the mountain.
It's a slightly more complex structure than it looks, actually. It's in 3 parts. I was sort of, I'm going to have to write in the third person. Didn't really know how to do it. So I sort of invented kind of the sort of narrative hat. It is third person, but it's kind of first person, really. It's just I say he and she instead of I. But then you have to set yourself... Well, I mean, there's different types of third person narratives. There's a whole spectrum where you've got sort of, say, Henry Fielding's, where it's sort of, welcome to my novel. Come in, sit down, let me tell you about this chap, Tom Jones, and we're going on a journey together. As we get that sort of... What's a technical term? The omniscient third-person narrator, through to the opposite of that, the know-nothing third-person narrator, where the reader is told nothing more than the characters know, and me, I keep my fat face out of the novel, the author. However, you do have to work out what you're going to do about thought. Are the characters' thoughts going to be visible? That's important. That's important for dramatic irony. Are you going to know more than what the characters know? So I invented, it's probably as old as Aristotle, but the idea of a narrative hat which sits on a character's head, and that is the character. It's a sort of narrative hat with a little digicam mounted on top with a spike going into the brain, so you can also get the thoughts. And that sits on one person's head in the first part of the book. So we only get Jacob's thoughts, and it's Jacob's head. Then in the second, in part 2, it's on 2 characters' heads. Orito, the midwife, and Ogawa, the translator. And then in the third part of the book, it sits on 3, alternately, on 3 characters' heads. Jacob again, the British sea captain, and the magistrate of Nagasaki. So it sort of goes from a sort of a one-stroke engine. Can you have a one-stroke engine? It goes from a one-stroke engine to a 2-stroke engine to a 3-stroke engine. And it sort of, hopefully, gives a sense of acceleration.
And was it easy to move between one of these hats and another, or did you feel very... Because I think there's a strong sense of identification with Jacob. I feel that it's...
Easy and fun, actually, yeah. It's... because of the constraints of Dejima, which I was talking about earlier, and how unnovelistic a place it was, I found fairly early on that I couldn't keep Dejima going that long and not be boring. And once you're boring, you've had it, of course. and I can't ask anyone to read a book that I know is getting boring. It might be boring, but I don't think it is. So I had to get off a Dejima after about 180 pages. That was about the limit, kind of a chunky novella length. That was all that was in there, really, at least with the plot I had. So yeah, it wasn't. Was it easy? Yeah, it was easy. Also, if I did that, it would just have been a Dutch book, and I wanted it to be a Dutch-Japanese book. And in an earlier manuscript, odd-numbered chapters were going to be narrative hatted by Dutch characters, and even-numbered chapters were going to be narrative hatted by Japanese characters. So after doing 180 pages of Jacob, I kind of wanted the balance to be restored and actually let us see the Dutch through the eyes of the Japanese. And then in the final third of the book, I also wanted to include sort of narrative hat head that was new to the whole situation, because the Dutch and Japanese knew what was going on, but with the HMS Phoebus sections of the income of the British, blundering and idiotic as usual, not knowing what on earth they were sailing into, a little bit, kind of, in a sense, like the reader at the beginning. The British couldn't take anything for granted because they didn't know what was going on. And again, at the beginning of the book, the reader can't either.
And as can't Jacob, he's in the same position, isn't he?
Yeah, up to a point. Of course, he was Dutch and a part of the East Indies Company, so he would know a little bit what the terms of engagement were.
Yeah. That question, though, of being very close to a character, perhaps, I think, thinking of Cloud Atlas and Ghostwritten, we spend a lot of time with lots of different people travelling between different sections of narrative that deal with different lives. And I do feel that in Black Swan Green and then into 1000 Autumns, there is much more revealed of the inner life of different characters. Is this a progression, do you think, that is happening through your work? Is that a direction that you consciously decided to go in, or...?
I think it's more a case of me slowly, belatedly learning how to write novels. No, really, with the first 3, I thought, oh God, I can't write a novel, but it's so big, look at them. But what I could write is a story, maybe a short story. And so I sort of build them up, sort of atomistically, that's a highfalutin word for this time of night, like Lego. Sort of, you do your sentences, and then, well, you've got your words, and you do your sentences, put your sentences and dovetail them in into paragraphs, and sort of get sort of the circuitry and the heft and the grain of them right with your buts and your althous and your yets and your stills and your ands. So it's a nice little lumpy hole. And then you get your paragraphs and build those up into scenes. And you might only need 3 scenes, and that's your chapter. Okay, I got my chapter. In the case of Ghostwritten, my first thing, each section's got 4 chapters. Not called chapters, we've got a little ornamenty thing to kind of separate them from one another. And
is this all true, though? Because you read these novels and they look like they're really beautifully, perfectly, absolutely planned to the absolute T, and the structures are so perfectly contrived. Is it really that chance when you put it
is just like Lego, actually. So if you build a nice thing out of Lego and step back and have a look at it and it look, wow, this is an amazing plan to build this symmetrical thing, and all the colours are right, and the corner stops are blue, and the bits over the window, those are white, and what a complex plan that must have been. But it's more sort of as you go along with, I mean, you don't plan a Lego cathedral, do you?
I kind of thought that you would, actually, but maybe not.
Life's too short, Jenny. No, you just kind of work on pretty soon with novels. You sort of you get a picture about length and how this bit. I mean, you plan more vaguely insofar. Yeah. Actually, planning it comes down to small numbers. So goes to it. So the first thing has got each of its 9 sections is one answer to the question: why do things happen? Sort of greed, fate, history, the abdication of the will, luck, whatever these things are, quantum physics. I can only think of 9 answers, so that's 9, and each of those, 9's a nice number anyway, and each of those has got 4, because that sort of lets you sort of start off, then build that up, and then kind of comes down the other side, and then, no, that's not looking very good, is it, man? Yeah, it's kind of like 4-ness about it, kind of 4 acts, 4 seasons, it just kind of goes. Then, say, Cloud Atlas was going to have 9 parts, but that was turning into an Antonio Gaudi again. So we're going to call that, so 9 went down to 6, but 6 is nice, it sort of is like a mountain. It's, in fact, the exact middle of the novel takes place on the top of the mountain. It goes up and down and 3 and 3, and so you kind of think in terms of, I sort of do my structure in terms of numbers and yeah.
And Lego.
Numbers and Lego, yeah.
We're going to have to go to audience questions because we're almost out of time. So
Are
maybe,
we?
yeah.
Oh, that flew by.
We'll give the tech guys a chance to get the mic organised. But in the meantime...
Wow, I can see you. That was thousands of you. Ah, I'm glad I couldn't see that before I came on. I'd have swum back to Auckland. Right.
I've got another question for you while we get ready, though, which
Sure.
is unrelated. But I hear that Cloud Atlas is about to go into production. The film.
They don't call it Holly Weird for nothing. It's.
What do you think, though? Because these, I mean, the idea of these novels going out into being somebody else's creative fodder is really quite challenging.
Well, firstly, it's sort of on the last few rungs of the ladder coming out of what's it called? I've forgotten the word. Development hell, right. It's called. That's the official. If you can even Wikipedia the words development hell, and this is where optioned books go. And they stay there for years, and as long as they pay you when they renew the option, that's fine by me. But. So it's only on the last few rungs, sort of, and you only believe it's going into production when it is going into production, and even when it's in production, sort of if whoever's agent gets out of bed the wrong side that day and says, no, I'm going to get some more money out of it, then it can all collapse.
But isn't it the Wachowski brothers, and it's got Tom Hanks and Halle Berry and quite a few big names attached to it, so the likelihood of it going south at this stage is pretty slim.
Oh no, the likelihood of it going south...
Ever the optimist.
South by southwest is always possible. Well, I mean, to answer your question, you make up your mind when you agree to take the money.
Right.
And once you do... I sort of get impatient with the writers who say, no, they weren't true to my vision. Then give them back the money, and then you can complain.
Fair enough.
But they don't do that. They just say, oh, they drove a coach and horses over my beautiful book. But
so will you watch it? Will you watch the film?
oh yeah. No, I've seen the script, and I think it's very impressive.
You do? You like it?
I really do. If the film was as good as the script looks to me, then it could at least be as good a film as the book is a book, however good the book is. That was a hell of a sentence, wasn't it? That's a high point of the evening, that sentence was.
Well, speaking of high point of the evening...
They aren't just trying to film the book, and I think that's often why films don't work. They stay too true to the book, and you get everything, in which case you don't need a film, just read the book. They've sort of stripped... they've disassembled the book and reassembled it in such a way that I think will make... it could be a really great film. Like Lego, they've reassembled it. It's a recurrent theme in the evening, isn't it?
Great, okay. It's a little bit difficult to see, so if there are questions, if you'd like to come down to the microphones, there's actually one on each level. So we'll start at the top.
It's a bit intimidating as well, so don't be intimidated, because Mark Twain read here, apparently.
I am.
Oh, hello, sir.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, hi.
I'm quite intimidated, actually.
Well, you're doing a great job so far. So,
thanks. I'm pleased with how it's going. I just wanted to ask, because your first three in particular, Number 9 Dream, that no one seems to be mentioning, and Ghost Written, they're spewing and brimming with ideas, and there's been a slow tapering. You've explained that you feel more confident about writing longer, but I'm just wondering whether you regret burning so many good ideas so quickly. There's so many good stories in each of them, and it was always a shame when a chapter ended, and they're now...
Oh, thank you so much.
You've kind of used them all, and they're gone, burned in seconds almost.
No, I'm really honoured. No, thanks for your question. It's a good one, and I've never been asked it. To be honest, I don't really know what's in those first 3 books anymore. I mean, I'm glad you think there are some good ideas. I suppose
Do you get a block now? Like, do you have trouble?
No, not at all. Never suffered from that, really. I do know what you mean. I was much... know what you mean, although I think about it a little bit differently. How I think of it is that my first 3 books were sort of put ideas in lieu of working them through to the logical conclusions. Perhaps I was somewhat driven by a fear of being boring, which is an unforgivable sin in fiction for me as a reader, and me as a reader is my ultimate guide and mentor for me as a writer. And maybe it was my fear of being boring drove me to quickly brush onto a new idea, and a new idea, and another idea after that, and another idea after that. Almost to sort of write the elements in part as plot synopses rather than plots. The way, I mean, I don't mean this in a self-aggrandizing way, but the way Georges Louis Borges, never anything over about 6 pages, and his plots are really plot synopses, sort of, and often literally they are. He would write short stories about a book about, and this is where you get the plot. So I think I used to think more in those terms, just to sort of, in a sense, a lack of faith in my ability to take my time with the plot and sort of grow it slowly like a pumpkin. I guess these days I'm more of a pumpkin grower than a donut maker. Don't know where that came from. I was thinking of donuts going woo, 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 woo. Mushrooms. Does that kind of answer your question? It was a really good one, thank you.
Do we have one in the middle level, here on the left? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Hello. Hi.
That's a really nice place to sit. I wish I was sitting there.
We came in at just the right time. We didn't get a seat down here, but we scored one right here.
Good timing, so that's the trick, huh?
Yeah. I'm really, really excited about the film.
Thank you.
As I'm sure everybody else is. And what about Tom Hanks? What I want to know is something that really struck me from the book was the piece of music. And I imagined what the piece of music would be, and I guess everybody's probably got their own personal version of it. And I'm thinking you've probably got your personal version of it. And if not, if there isn't a piece of music, then do you know what the music for the film is going to be?
Right. This is the Cloud Atlas Sextet, the piece of music in the book. Well, it's been made actually. A group of 6 very bonkers Dutch composers got together and decided to write it as it's described in the book, and each of them writes one part of it, and it's cut in the middle, and except the centre part, which you get in its entirety, and then the part twos are recited or heard performed on the way out. And that's why Jacob's from Middelburg rather than Amsterdam, because it was premiered in like 2008 or so in Middelburg, which is in Zealand, the old Zealand, obviously, not the New Zealand. And now, at least, when I think of, whenever I have reason to think of that piece of music, that's a piece of music it is. And if you have nothing else to spend your money on, then Google my name, Cloud Atlas Music, and Middelburg, and you'll be able to work out how to get a copy. It's rather good. Who's doing the music for the film? If touch wood, etc. Various superstitions. Spit 3 times. Devil, I defy thee. Some magpies, etc. If the film gets made, then I've no idea who's doing the music. And how annoying would it be for a filmmaker who spent 3 years, making a film compared to the process of getting the money together for a film is a walk in the park. How annoying would it be if you really, I think, spend about 4 years sort of the finagling, the Machiavellian, that's the bullshit you have to do to try and assemble the wherewithal. If then the author, this sort of ingrate, just says, yes, and by the way, you can only do it if Supertramp are making the music. No, I can't do that to them. I like them too much. They're really interesting people, and I don't want them to lose my respect for me by my insistence that it's John Anderson or nobody. Yeah.
Do we have one on the bottom level here? Nope.
Oh, there's a hello.
Right down here at the front.
Give me a yell, then I'll repeat it for everyone else. Hi, Ella.
I was just wondering, I know that you taught English in Japan in the past, and you obviously like doing things, with people. Do you find writing quite a lonely process?
Is writing a lonely process? Thank you, Ella. Yes. 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 No, it is. And writers deeply envy musicians who kind of not only get the girl, they also sort of have the interaction, and they have the immediate gratification. It's why I like festivals, actually. Just for a little I can fantasise that I'm David Gilmour and not David Mitchell. And hi, it's of course I'm a shy, retreating introvert. I'm an introvert as well, but a part of me isn't, and a part of me, you've read my book, thank you, and you're a real person, and you're not some bizarre conspiracy of my publishers. Or it's really nice to sort of know that. Oddly as well, you're somebody sad, but your characters keep you company. I spend more time with non-existent people than I do my own family, literally. And I used to get so annoyed when writers would say, "I just sit down and the characters tell me what they want to do, and they come along." I say, "Oh, no, they don't," but kind of they do as well. And when they surprise you, when there's a bit where Jacob's been very pious and clever and artful and guileful, and he's arrived on Dejima as the golden boy wonder of this new honest boss that's going to stamp out all the dirty, corrupt practices, which is how the men are earning their livelihoods, really, because the company's not paying them enough. And they've all spat into his breakfast. and kind of into his beer, and he knows they have, and kind of they bring him the tray, and you sit down, have your breakfast. Come on, have your breakfast. And I was thinking, well, how can Jacob, in a Jacob-like way, kind of get out of this? And what clever thing would he say? What would be his sort of artful evasion? And he just suddenly cracks, and he's had enough, and he just kicks the tray, and it goes flying, it hits the ceiling, and splashes down everywhere. I didn't mean for him to do that, but he kind of just did it. He just snapped. And that kind of, I love it when that happens. Just love it. It's not me, it's him. So yes, it is a lonely business, but my little creations, they're my babies, and they come to life, and they say, "Daddy, we love you, Daddy," and we'll have... so it's not really that lonely. And so whenever writers talk in a self-pitying way about just hit them, just headbutt them, and say, "This is from me, and this is from David Mitchell," and just do it twice, because they've got nothing to moan about.
The entire staff of a writers' festival are in here. That could bode badly for a lot of other writers that in the light.
They have no right to moan. We really don't. I love doing what I do. I never stop being astonished and grateful that you buy what I write and give me your money and what, it takes about 12 hours to read this thing. If I were to pay you 12 hours at sort of minimum wage, I'd owe you a fortune, but you still do it, and thank you. I'm not joking, really. I never stop being astonished by that and grateful. So no. Yes, it's a lonely business, but this is the terms of the contract. But it's a contract I'm really happy to sign for as long as you want to keep reading me, and my publishers think you want to keep reading me, more importantly. Thanks, Eleanor.
That's a lovely place to end. Would you please join me in thanking David Mitchell?
Thank you.